The survivors would have a numerous amount of Into the Sunset scenarios that could either leave them dead, together, separated, or rebuilding a new world. But what about the infected that dominated the populace of the United States? That's actually a variable with not too many different incidences, but the difference is severely drastic. This time around, we are looking at what happened to the infected after Left 4 Dead 2. The strongest possibility would be similar to what happened to the infected at the end of 28 days later. Keep in mind the events of Left 4 Dead 1 occurred 2 weeks after the first infection, and Left 4 Dead 2 is just 1 more week after that, so a total of 21 days have passed since the very first human was infected with the green flu virus. Most people were still freshly infected and were, for more or less, at the healthiest point that their bodies will be here on out. Even though most people tend to look at Left 4 Dead as a zombie genre, we have to consider it in the same light as the 28 days / weeks later franchise. These people are not dead and are merely suffering from a drastically overpowered version of the rabies virus, but with even more drastic mutations. With this in mind, they are still living human beings down to their anatomy and will possibly eventually die without proper bodily upkeep. Humans have been shown to survive over 3 weeks without consuming any food, an example being the leader of the Indian independence movement Mahatma Gandhi, who went 21 days without eating a morsel. Other cases, as noted by Scientific American, have shown people to have gone without food for up to 40 days, just a week past a month, but in these cases they were hunger strikes where the people in question sipped on water to stay alive. This was not the case for those who voluntarily hunger striked, but also those who were suffering during a famine, or even worse, during concentration camps where scarce amounts of water were the only thing keeping suffering people alive. Food is important to survival, but water is an even bigger requirement. Humans can typically only last 3 to 4 days without water, considering we are literally 60% water, but it is much more necessary to our survival than food is. Without water, a person will suffer from dehydration, which can lead to seizures, overheating of the body to the point of heat stroke, kidney problems, and a severe drop in blood sugar and pressure. It would go as far to say that these infected would, at some degree, suffer from the same basic human afflictions, but to either better or worse extent. The infection causes victims to frequently vomit and possibly suffer from diarrhea, can't really tell unless you want to pull down their pants, which would expel more fluids from the body, increasing the demand for H2O. As much as a fever, sweating, and increasing urination would be taxing on the body as well, which a fever and sweating is pretty much given with the green flu as well, all of these factors can prove to be deadly. Before we get into how an infected can survive without food and water, it is also important to note that humans have been shown to go 8 to 11 days without sleep before collapsing or outright dying of pure exhaustion. Infected have not been shown to sleep or even rest, but just to wander, which are signs of insomnia, a high case apparent in victims of rabies. The green flu is similar to rabies in the fact that it makes its host more feral and prone to spreading disease. Don't let the flu name fool you. This disease was given such a nicer name as the flu to prevent mass panic. Rabies will eat away at the brain, causing delirium, hallucinations, and in 70% of recorded cases, a furious strain which results in overly hyper and excited behavior, a fear of water, which explains the infected's inability to swim or consume water, and sometimes a fear of flying, which may be why helicopter pilots became infected so quickly while airborne, causing an increasing fear of being in the air to trigger the brain to mutate. People suffering from rabies can also live anywhere between 10 days to 2 years before their brain completely shuts down or their vital organs follow suit. So what does this mean for an infected and its survivability over time? A lot. Like I said earlier, the infected are still living, somewhat breathing human beings who are undergoing a deadly disease that will eventually kill them, but in the meantime, they will do everything in their power to tear apart those who do not share their affliction. So these are pretty much advanced strains of rabies that people are infected with who cannot benefit from what I will call, from here on out, the 3 necessities of life: eating, drinking, and sleeping. These people, these infected, these commons, these specials, anybody that's got the green flu, they will not last long. After 3 weeks, their cognitive functions and motor skills seem to have stayed at a peak performance rate when it comes to animalistic traits. Common infected show enhanced dexterity, so their conscious state seems to be at least primal level, considering they lack the prior common sense to open doors. It isn't shown in the games or the comics that the infected eat their victims, but actually just use their teeth to tear them apart and spread their infection. They are shown to lean against walls and sit on the ground in a somewhat of a resting state, but not a full sleep. They are never shown to drink water, so it's safe to assume these would all accumulate and take their toll on the green flu patients. It would be safe to assume that the infected mutated enough to where they could survive for at least a month without the 3 essentials of life, but, you know, like I always say, these are just estimations and just discussion talk. Their bodies would break down fats and lipids much faster to compensate for malnourishment, so by week 4, they would also seem to look even skinnier and haggard. Their hair would fall out as well, as shown from signs of anorexia and malnourishment, and their bones would be more readily visible through their flesh and would be more brittle and susceptible to damage. They would most likely begin to lose their ability to climb tall surfaces and start to look like the infected in 28 days later, who are just withering bodies struggling to even move on the streets of London, as shown in the very end of the movie. This would only account for humans who have experienced the full length of the infection. Those that are freshly infected would still retain their motor skills until a certain amount of time has passed, depending on how healthy they were pre-infection. If a group of survivors were to last past a month and were immune to the effects of the outbreak, they could easily outlast the infected as they slowly died out over time, as long as no new personnel are influenced by the virus. The infected would most likely all keel over and their rotting corpses would fill the landscape. A lot of cremating is gonna have to be done at that point. Break out the hazmat suits and the lemon pledge. We've got some cleaning up to do.
We need more lemon pledge.
You need more lemon pledge.
Yes.
But if that accounts for the regular infected who don't show much difference from regular humans, what about the special infected who are highly mutated versions of a human body? Special infected would probably not last long over a monthly or even weekly basis, comparable to the common infected who are still the most human-like without extreme bodily defects wearing down their body like the Tank and Spitter. Looking into special infected, we can make quick assumptions on how their abilities would affect them over long periods of time. The hunter's joints would begin to deteriorate fast due to the extreme amounts of pressure exerted from his high-altitude jumps. The hunter would most likely develop a vicious form of arthritis, like your boy Zack asked. Fun tip about me, I had a total left hip replacement back in 2013 because of arthritis. Yep, I'm part metal. Oh, that's so brutal. Over time, the arthritis would restrict the hunter's abilities and prevent mantis-like jumping from occurring. After some time, the arthritis would spread more and more till his whole body would seize up and constrict, leaving him immobilized until he eventually died of the 3 necessities of life. The smoker would eventually develop enough tumors that it would just shut down its entire body. The smoker of L4D2 is proof enough that the tumors are taking over his body at an alarming rate, and eventually his whole carcass would look like a mountain of bubble wrap. Really disgusting looking bubble wrap. The boomer's body would eventually shut down from its own doing, considering it's seizing most of its vital organs to just make bile 24/7. The body would consistently corrode from the amount of bile produced and eventually eat through the skin, and the boomer will kill over in a gooey mass. The same goes for the Spitter, as her stomach acid would completely destroy its own body, as it has already been shown to be doing. It would be safe to say that the Boomer and Spitter would probably be the first infected to die out over time. It's hard to say what would become of the Jockey and Charger. However, the Jockey's mania would probably mutate enough to where the brain would suffer from such extreme amounts of mental stress that it would eventually just shut itself down. The Charger would probably die from EMBS, Extreme Meat Beating Syndrome. His right arm from fapping so much would grow 3 times as large, but his heart rate would fluctuate so heavily it would seize up and kill the Charger. There you go, you got your one last Charger fap joke. I'm not doing any more. Fap. Seriously though, considering how withered one side of his body has become, it would be safe to say the body would be favoring the right side of his body and shut down all organs that are located among the left side of its body, i.e. his heart. The witch would probably die out shortly after the Boomers and Spitters because of her already established predisposition of malnourishment and anorexia, but at an even faster rate than the common infected. And the last of the special infected, the Tank, would honestly die just as soon as the witch, if not sooner. The Tank, overstimulating its own body to build muscle mass, would heavily deprive the host of necessary nutrients, especially since no new protein or energy sources are entering the body. Bodybuilders would be quick to say how important nutrition is for upkeep of this kind of body. The Tank would either die of heart palpitations or lose his muscle mass and his body would just flat out shut down at a faster rate than commons. Either way, all that body mass is just not gonna work. It's just gonna make him shut the hell down. Plus, he skipped leg day. From what bodybuilders tell me, never skip leg day. I wouldn't know. I haven't entered a gym in like 5 years. I'm a scrawny little bitch.
Is it hot in here, or is it just me?
Those are the scientific, or at least scientific sounding outcomes of what would happen to the infected, but it could be safe to say that the mutations of the green flu could cause them to have an extended life period without 3 necessities of life. But I find it hard to believe. The events of Left 4 Dead span to 3 weeks after the first infection, but give it about 5 more weeks or 2 months after the first infection when the entirety of the North and South American continents are possibly overrun, or just the US is quarantined. Once there is a point where no new infected can be created, we can finally note the steady decline of old infected dying out. It is also safe to say that there would be different special infected strains as the green flu mutated over time, but a virus strain can only mutate as much as there is a population to incubate it in. Plus, I think I could make a whole video of new special infected ideas. People have been throwing that around, but I'm not going to make up my own designs because I can't draw worth a damn. Well, not on Adobe whatever. Anyways, overall, I would say the infection would go on as normal, but factors of human life would interfere and begin to kill off veteran infected while the green flu runs rampant and adds more soldiers to its green army. Nothing lives forever, and the infected won't last long in a world where basic human necessities are a must and exist. So, that about wraps up things for the infected. A bit of a dry read, a boring lecture, or an interesting discussion on how things would turn out, you decide. Was there something I didn't bring up that you thought of? Let me know in the comments. Next time around, we are discussing if Coldstream was canon or not. So if you like what you heard and saw, leave a like and comment, and don't forget to subscribe to see more WoW content. Ring that bell to ensure it hits your YouTube feed, and follow me on Twitter, Facebook, my Discord server, and, if you feel generous, donate to my Patreon. All those are in the description of the video. Which quick shout out to my patrons and super chat donators: Lovable Tester, Mario, NATO6141, Ricardo Ascension, Prank Film, Zeno Salvador, Scout with the Name, Twilight Duck, Nick B, Benny Boy, Kylie Elizabeth, Emerald Wolf, Florian B. Bell, Gaius Maiden, Jesse Piazza, Seductive Spy, Ninja Brian X, Ultra Instinct Adam, Carlisha Owens, The Gaming Hoovie, That Emo Guy, Taylor07, Juan Rodriguez, Retro Gamer, Josh McGugan, Michael Anthony, and Nick O'War. Thank you for your generous donations. They are helping me during these times of doing work and doing the YouTube channel. It really inspires me to keep going, especially with all of y'all's kind comments, and some people's not so much. If you want to see more, click one of the videos below to learn more about the lore of Left 4 Dead, and until next time, I'm Zack, aka Wow Such Gaming. Stay wow!